In 586 BC, the Babylonians conquer Jerusalem. The Judeans have lost their religious center and their land. Jerusalem is in ashes. Judea is assimilated into the Babylonian kingdom that stretches from the Mediterranean to Persia. In the center of this vast empire lies the legendary city of Babylon. It is the time of Nebuchadnezzar II. Babylon is a city of superlatives. Witnesses are awestruck by its magnificence. The houses are built of solid brick walls. The Tower of Babel is legendary, and the Hanging Gardens are among the 7 wonders of the ancient world. In 539 BC, the Persian king Cyrus conquers Babylon and allows the Judeans to return home. Some decide to stay and found the Babylonian community that was to remain in existence for more than 2,000 years. For many scholars, the history of the Jews begins with the return from exile. This is the first time they speak of Jews. They are faced by a great challenge. Ezra and other scholars compile the Torah from writings and other traditions. It became the constitution of the Jews in the middle of the 5th century. In 332 BC, the Greek Macedonian ruler Alexander the Great conquers the Mediterranean's east coast. Soon, Judea also belongs to his vast realm. Even though Alexander's empire fell apart shortly after his death, Hellenic civilization influenced the entire region for centuries to come. In 178 BC, the successors of the Greek ruler Alexander attack Jerusalem and dedicate the temple to the god Zeus. King Antiochus forbids the reading of the Torah and circumcision. He sends soldiers to force the population to worship Greek gods. They come to Modi'in, the home village of Judas and his family. The priest Mattathias adjures the inhabitants. God forbid that we should forsake the law and the ordinances. In a rage, Mattathias kills the commander-in-chief. The family flees into the mountains. Soon more and more followers come to join them. For many decades, the rebels fight the occupation. After his father's death, Judas takes over the leadership. He gets the epithet Maccabi, the hammer. Judas Maccabeus reconquers the Temple Mount in Jerusalem and drives off the Hellenized Jews. He destroys the statue of Zeus and dedicates the temple to the God of the Jews again, on the 25th of Kislev, the 3rd month of the Jewish calendar. According to legend, only a small bottle of ritual oil was left. It is said to have fed the flame of the menorah, the 7-branched candelabrum, for 8 days. The celebration of the dedication of the temple marks the glorious climax of the revolt. The story of the heroic resistance of the Maccabees is told to this day. When Judas died, his brothers continued the fight. His descendants continued to rule the independent state for another 200 years. In 66 BC, the Roman general Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus conquers Asia Minor. Judea becomes part of the Roman province of Syria and is incorporated into the Roman superpower. From now on, the city on the Tiber will determine the fate of the Jewish people. Here, a man enters the political arena who is despised by the Jewish people and feared by them because of his unscrupulousness: Herod the Great. The Roman Senate declares Herod king of Judea. Rome will protect him as long as he represents Rome's interests. He survives several changes of power at the head of the Roman state through charm and diplomacy. When he ascends his Judean throne, the real power behind him is actually Rome. The king curries favor among the people. One major building project is meant to silence the critics. particularly the devout Jews. A new temple is proposed, which will even eclipse Solomon's temple. It is designed to have an inner courtyard which can accommodate vast crowds of pilgrims. This is how Herod wants to go down in history. His plan works. For a while, Herod even manages to unite religious splinter groups. The construction of the temple doesn't just increase the prestige of the king, but also that of the Jewish religion in the world. It also breathes new life into Judean trade, and Jerusalem becomes a metropolis in which 100,000 people live. Herod, however, doesn't live to see its dedication. He dies 60 years earlier. Herod had unified the kingdom, but now Rome divides the state. Jerusalem is in unrest. Religious parties are arguing about the occupation. At the temple, the most sacred place in the city, the different views clash. Many hope for the Messiah, a savior promised by God. He will, so they believe, end this foreign rule and finally bring about eternal peace. Criticism of both the Roman occupation and the Jewish upper class and their relationship to religion is becoming louder. In particular, for devout Jews, the goings-on outside the temple are an affront to God. In the eyes of his followers, the preacher Jesus is the Messiah. For the Romans, he is a rabble-rouser. They crucify him. Nobody suspects that his death is the birth of a new world religion, closely linked with the fate of the Jewish people. Crucifixion is a common form of punishment that the Romans use against tiresome rabble-rousers, but the early Christians don't blame the Romans for the death of Jesus, they blamed the Jewish people. For them, Judas Iscariot becomes the embodiment of the greedy traitor, and gradually he comes to be seen as the embodiment of the Jew, plain and simple. To this day, the fabricated caricature serves them as justification for their hostility to the Jews. That Jesus was a Jew himself is conveniently forgotten. A few decades later, the Zealots, a radical religious group, have taken over the power in Jerusalem. They want to liberate the land from the Romans. For 2 years, Roman legions besiege the city where refugees from the entire region are hiding out. Only gravediggers are allowed to leave Jerusalem. In order to prevent the spread of disease, the dead are buried outside of the city walls. This time they're transporting a special load. The wise Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai has passed away, they claim, and their sorrow is immense. The further fate of the rabbi is recounted by a Jewish legend. So it happened that Yohanan ben Zakkai managed to escape from Jerusalem alive in a wooden coffin. The rabbi isn't out to save his own life, but the faith and the knowledge of his people, his memories and his hopes. He's planning a new religious center far away from the besieged metropolis. If Jerusalem is lost, at least the spirit of Jewry must have a new home. A little while later, the Romans occupy the city and destroy the temple. Yohanan ben Zakkai implements far-reaching reforms. He abolishes animal sacrifice, which has been the custom in the temple. Communal prayer and the study of the Torah take its place. The menorah becomes the symbol for the holy city of Jerusalem and the lost temple. Some mosaics of the time are now in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. They decorated the floors of ancient synagogues. That's the name given to the Jews' places of congregation, in which they also commemorate their history. To this day, the communal prayer is of great significance. In 135 AD, Emperor Hadrian put down the last revolt of the Jews. After the destruction of the temple, the Romans had already had coins stamped with the inscription Judea Capta, Judea captured. Now they destroy Jerusalem completely and erect a new city. They rename the province of Judea Syria Palestina. Jews are prohibited from settling in this land. Many flee to already established communities. The Roman historian Strabo writes, "The last are already in nearly every city on earth, and it's not easy to find a place on this earth that doesn't house this people." Some stay in northern Palestine, close to their holy city. Many answers to questions of everyday life are still only handed down orally. Together with his students, Judah Hanassi begins to write down the so-called oral Torah. What is created is the Mishnah, a compilation of all guidelines and teachings for a life in the spirit of the Torah. The Mishnah helps devout Jews to live the laws of the Torah in everyday life. So too with the dietary laws known as kashrut, that prescribe what can be eaten and what cannot. The Jews differentiate between kosher, pure, and trefa, impure. This holds for all food and its preparation. One of the many laws of the Torah is, "Thou shalt not seethe a kid in his mother's milk." For the family from Jerusalem, that means that they mustn't cook and eat milk and meat together. For the kitchen, this means separate fridges, sinks, tablecloths, pots and cutlery. Amongst animals, they also distinguish between pure and impure. Kosher are fish with scales, most poultry, and cloven-hoofed animals that chew the cud. After the loss of Jerusalem and the Temple, the Torah and the Mishnah become important sources of identity. The Jews are now a nation without a land, but their writings ensure their unity as a religious community. Once a people of the Temple, they are now a people of the writings. Abba is appointed rabbi. Now he is allowed to make decisions in ritual questions and civil judgments. Thus distinguished, he returns to Babylon. He wants to bring his knowledge to the Jews of his homeland. Abba returns to his Babylonian home. Many Jewish communities have been in existence here for 700 years. Abba's destinations are the great centers of Jewish teaching on the Euphrates, Pumbeditha, Nahadia, and Surah. In Surah, the Jewish scholar founds an academy that's soon known as the Little Shrine. Abba makes the laws and rules from Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, known in Babylon. He's now called Rav, teacher of the entire Diaspora. His authority is generally accepted. Soon the schools in Babylon surpass those of the old homeland. Together with other scholars, Abba writes a great work that will shape Jewish religion to this day. In its current form, the Babylonian Talmud, as it's called, contains 6,000 pages and addresses questions of all areas of life. It is made up of the Mishnah and commentaries from nearly 3,000 rabbis from 3 continents. A page resembles the cross-section of a tree trunk. In its center is the Mishnah. Around it, like growth rings on trees, the commentaries from 7 centuries.